The Garden in the Attic. Chapter 1. The House on the Hill. In the quiet village of Glenmore, the house on the hill stood like a forgotten memory. It was made of gray stone, with thick walls and a steep roof. The red door was faded, and the windows were small and dusty. Ivy climbed up the sides, and moss grew between the stones. The house looked old, but strong. It had survived many winters, many storms, and many years of silence. Most people in the village walked past it without stopping. They didn't talk about it. They didn't ask questions. They said it was strange. They said it was empty. But they were wrong. Inside the house lived a young woman named Moira. She was 28 years old. She had soft brown hair, quiet eyes, and a gentle smile. She worked at the local post office, sorting letters and helping neighbors with packages. She was polite and calm. People liked her, but they didn't know her well. She didn't talk much about herself. She didn't go to parties or events. After work, she walked home alone and stayed inside. She liked silence. She liked books. She liked the sound of the wind through the trees. Moira had inherited the house from her grandmother, Edith. Edith had lived there for many years. She was known as a kind but mysterious woman. She had grown herbs, made tea, and told stories that no one believed. When she passed away, she left the house to Moira. At first, Moira didn't want to move in. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories. But something pulled her there. She felt a connection, even if she didn't understand it. The house was full of old furniture, dusty books, and forgotten objects. There were paintings on the walls, some beautiful, some strange. There were boxes in the corners, filled with letters and photographs. Moira cleaned slowly, room by room. She didn't throw things away. She felt that everything had a story. She wanted to learn, not erase. She found comfort in the quiet rooms and the soft light that came through the windows. But at night, the house felt different. The air became cooler. The shadows grew longer. The wind made soft sounds in the attic. Moira didn't feel afraid, but she felt something she couldn't explain. It was not danger. It was not sadness. It was something deeper. Something waiting. She often sat near the fireplace, reading or writing, while the moonlight touched the floor. She listened to the silence and wondered what the house was hiding. Moira didn't know much about the house's history. Her grandmother had never told her everything. There were no records, no clear stories. Only hints. Only feelings. The villagers didn't speak about it. They respected the house, but they didn't visit. They said it was better to leave old things alone. But Moira didn't agree. She believed that old places held wisdom. She believed that silence could teach. She began to notice small things. A door that didn't open before now moved easily. A window that had been stuck now let in air. The attic, which had always been dark, now seemed to glow faintly at night. She didn't understand why. She didn't try to explain. She simply watched. She paid attention. She let the house speak in its own way. Moira was not looking for magic. She was not looking for adventure. She was looking for peace. But the house had other plans. It had waited for someone who could listen. Someone who could see. Someone who could care. And now, Moira was there. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know what the attic would show her. But she was ready to learn. She was ready to feel. She was ready to grow. The house on the hill was no longer just a building. It was a place of quiet power. It was a place of hidden truth. And Moira, with her gentle heart and open mind, was about to discover what lived above her head, what bloomed in the moonlight, and what waited in silence. Chapter 2. The Attic Door. Moira had lived in the house on the hill for almost a year. She had explored every room, cleaned every corner, and sorted through many old boxes. But one evening, something changed. The sky outside was clear, and the moon was full. The light came through her bedroom window, soft and silver. As she sat reading, she heard a sound above her. It was not loud, but it was clear and gentle, like a whisper from the ceiling. She looked up and felt curious. She had never heard anything from the attic before. She stood on a chair and touched the ceiling. Her fingers found a small wooden door, hidden behind a beam. It was covered in dust and spiderwebs. She had never noticed it. It was not in any plan of the house. Carefully, she pushed it open. A narrow ladder led up into darkness. She climbed slowly, step by step, holding a small flashlight. The air grew colder as she moved higher. The attic was quiet, but it felt alive. When she reached the top, she stepped into the attic. It was dark and dusty. Old furniture stood in the corners. Boxes were stacked against the walls. But in the center of the attic, under a broken window, she saw something strange. There were plants growing, flowers, vines, and small trees. They were not dry or dead. They were fresh and green. Some had long leaves. Others had soft petals. They looked alive, but they were glowing faintly, as if touched by magic. Moira walked closer. She felt a chill in her body, but not from fear. It was something deeper, something she could not explain. The plants did not grow like normal garden flowers. They were wild, but beautiful. Their shapes were unusual. Their colors were soft but bright. She had never seen flowers like these. Some were blue with silver lines. Others were red with golden spots. A few were completely white, almost transparent. She sat down near the garden and waited. The moonlight began to move across the floor. When it touched the plants, something happened. The flowers began to bloom. Slowly, one by one, they opened. Their petals moved gently, as if breathing. The colors became stronger. The air filled with a sweet smell, but it was also heavy, like old perfume or deep forest air. Moira felt something move inside her. It was not fear. It was memory. It was emotion. She looked at one flower. It was dark purple with sharp edges. It reminded her of a moment from her past, a time when she had felt lost and scared. Another flower was soft and blue. It made her think of someone she had missed for years. Each flower seemed to carry a feeling, a thought, a piece of her life. She didn't know how the garden worked. She didn't know why it was there. But she understood that it was special. Moira stayed in the attic for a long time. She didn't speak. She didn't move much. She just watched the flowers bloom under the moonlight. She felt calm and quiet. She felt connected to something bigger than herself. The attic was not just a room. It was a place of reflection. It was a place where feelings became real. It was a garden of the soul. She climbed down before sunrise. The attic returned to darkness. The flowers closed. The glow faded. But Moira carried the feeling with her. She knew she had found something important. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. She needed time to understand. She needed time to listen. The attic door was no longer hidden. It was open. And so was her heart. Chapter 3. The First Bloom. The next night, Moira returned to the attic. The moon was full again, and the sky was clear. She climbed the ladder slowly, holding a small blanket and a notebook. She wanted to stay longer this time. She wanted to understand the garden better. The attic was quiet, and the air was cool. The plants were still, waiting for the moonlight. Moira sat near the center of the garden, close to the broken window. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and watched. As the moonlight touched the floor, the garden began to change. The soft glow returned, and the plants started to move. Leaves stretched gently. Petals opened slowly. The air filled with a sweet smell, like honey and wild herbs. Moira felt calm, but also curious. She looked at each flower, trying to understand their shapes and colors. Some were familiar. Others were strange. Then, one flower began to grow quickly. It rose from the soil with energy. Its stem was long and thin. Its petals were dark purple, almost black. They had sharp edges, like small blades. The flower looked strong, but also dangerous. Moira felt something inside her shift. Her heart beat faster. Her hands became cold. She knew this flower was different. It was not just a plant. It was something personal. She stared at the flower and remembered a moment from her childhood. She had been 8 years old, walking in the woods near her grandmother's house. She had wandered too far and lost her way. The trees had looked the same. The path had disappeared. She had felt alone and scared. The sun had started to set, and the shadows had grown longer. She had cried quietly, afraid to call for help. That fear had stayed with her for years, hidden deep inside. Now, that fear had taken shape. It had become a flower. Moira understood that the garden was not normal. It didn't grow vegetables or roses. It grew emotions. It grew memories. It grew the things people tried to forget. The flower was her fear, made real by the moonlight. She didn't know how the garden did this. She didn't know why. But she knew it was true. She reached out and touched the flower gently. The petals felt soft, not sharp. The stem was warm. It didn't hurt her. It didn't push her away. It simply existed. It was there to be seen, not feared. Moira felt a tear on her cheek. Not from sadness, but from release. She had carried that fear for so long without speaking about it. Now, it was in front of her. And it didn't control her anymore. She wrote in her notebook. She didn't write about the flower's shape or color. She wrote about the memory. She wrote about the feeling. She wrote about how it felt to see her fear as something real, something outside of her. The garden had given her a gift. It had shown her what was hidden. It had helped her understand herself. Moira stayed in the attic until the moon moved away. The flower slowly closed. The glow faded. The garden became still again. She climbed down quietly, holding her notebook close. She felt tired, but peaceful. She knew she would return. She knew there were more flowers to bloom. More emotions to face. More memories to understand. The garden was not just magical. It was meaningful. It was a place where feelings became visible. Where silence turned into color. Where fear became something you could touch and then let go. Moira didn't need to be afraid anymore. She had seen her fear bloom. And she had survived it. Chapter 4. Visitors in the Night. Moira kept the secret of the attic garden to herself for many nights. She returned again and again, always under the moonlight. Each time, she sat quietly and watched the flowers bloom. Some reminded her of sadness. Others reminded her of moments she had forgotten. The garden helped her understand her own emotions. It gave her peace. But she also began to wonder if the garden could help others too. One day, Moira thought about her friend Ewan. He was a quiet man who worked at the bakery in the center of the village. He was in his early 40s, with short blonde hair and soft eyes. He was kind and polite, but he always looked tired. He often walked with his head down and spoke in a low voice. People liked him, but they didn't know much about him. He never talked about his past. He never stayed long at gatherings. Moira had known him for years, but she felt there was something heavy in his heart. She decided to invite him to the attic. She didn't explain everything. She only asked him to come at night. Ewan agreed, curious but unsure. When he arrived, Moira led him up the ladder. The attic was quiet, and the moonlight was beginning to shine through the broken window. The garden was still, waiting. Ewan sat near the edge, looking around. He didn't speak. He simply watched. As the moonlight touched the plants, the garden began to glow. A flower bloomed near Ewan. It grew quickly, rising from the soil with soft movement. It was pale and thin, with long petals that looked like smoke. The air around it changed. It smelled like burning wood and ash. Ewan stared at the flower. His eyes filled with tears. He didn't try to hide them. He said the flower reminded him of a fire from his past, a fire that had destroyed his childhood home. He had never spoken about it. He had carried the memory alone for many years. Moira didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The flower had shown the truth. Ewan cried quietly, and then he sat in silence. After a while, he said he felt lighter. He said the flower had helped him remember, but also helped him let go. He thanked Moira and left the attic with a calm face. That night changed something in him. He smiled more at work. He spoke more to others. He looked up when he walked. After Ewan's visit, Moira began to invite more people. She chose them carefully. People who seemed quiet, people who carried something inside. She didn't promise anything. She only asked them to come and sit. Each visitor saw a flower bloom. Each flower was different. Some were bright and wild. Others were soft and slow. But all of them showed something personal. A fear. A memory. A feeling. One woman saw a flower shaped like a closed hand. It reminded her of a fight with her sister. A young man saw a flower that looked like broken glass. It reminded him of an accident he had caused. An older man saw a flower with no color. It reminded him of the years he had spent alone. Some visitors cried. Some stayed silent. Some spoke softly about what they saw. But all of them felt something change. The attic became a quiet place of healing. People didn't come in groups. They came one by one, always at night. They sat in silence and waited for the moonlight. They didn't need to explain. The garden understood. The flowers bloomed and the truth appeared. Moira didn't control the garden. She only opened the door. She only gave people a chance to see what they had hidden. The visitors left with lighter hearts. They didn't forget their fears, but they no longer carried them alone. The garden had shown them that emotions could bloom, that pain could be seen, and that healing could begin in silence. Moira watched each person leave with quiet joy. She knew the garden was doing something good. She knew it was helping. The attic was no longer just a room above her house. It was a place where people met their fears and found peace. It was a place where moonlight turned memories into flowers. And Moira, with her gentle heart, continued to guide others through the night. Chapter 5. The Garden Grows. The attic garden slowly became something more than a secret. It became a quiet place of healing. People from the village came only at night, always alone, always with quiet steps. They climbed the ladder carefully, entered the attic, and sat in silence. They didn't speak. They didn't ask questions. They simply waited. The moonlight was the key. When it touched the wooden floor and reached the center of the attic, the garden began to glow. The plants responded to the light. The flowers opened. The air changed. And something inside each visitor began to shift. Each flower was different. Some were small, with soft petals and gentle colors. Others were large, with strong stems and bold shapes. Some flowers looked like stars. Others looked like tears. A few had sharp edges, and a few were almost invisible. But all of them were real. They were not just plants. They were made from fear, pain, and memory. They came from deep inside the people who sat near them. The garden didn't grow from soil. It grew from emotion. Moira didn't control the garden. She didn't choose which flowers would bloom. She didn't tell the plants what to do. She only cared for the space. She swept the floor. She removed dust from the leaves. She opened the window each night so the moonlight could enter. She made sure the attic was quiet and clean. She respected the garden. She listened to it. She let it do its work. The garden grew stronger with each visit. The plants became taller. The colors became brighter. The smells became deeper. The energy in the attic became softer but more powerful. People felt it as soon as they entered. They felt calm. They felt safe. They felt seen. They didn't need to explain their feelings. The garden understood. The flowers bloomed, and the truth appeared. Moira watched the visitors with care. She didn't speak unless someone needed comfort. She didn't ask about their past. She let the garden speak for them. She saw how each person changed. Some cried quietly. Some sat still for a long time. Some smiled after many minutes of silence. All of them left with lighter hearts. They didn't forget their pain, but they no longer carried it alone. One night, a young woman named Isla came to the attic. She was shy and nervous. She had never spoken about her past. She sat near the garden and waited. A flower bloomed near her. It was small and blue, with petals like folded paper. Isla stared at it and began to breathe slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But when she left, she hugged Moira gently. That hug said everything. Another night, an older man named Fergus visited. He had lived in the village for many years. He had lost his wife long ago and never talked about her. A flower bloomed near him. It was white and soft, with a scent like old perfume. Fergus closed his eyes and smiled. He whispered something to the flower, then stood up and left. The next day, he brought fresh bread to Moira's house. It was his way of saying thank you. The garden continued to grow. It didn't need water. It didn't need sunlight. It needed moonlight and emotion. It needed people who were ready to face their fears. It needed silence and care. Moira gave it all of that. She became the quiet guardian of the attic. She didn't call herself a healer. She didn't want attention. She only wanted people to feel free. The village began to change. People spoke more kindly. They listened more deeply. They helped each other without asking why. The garden had touched something inside them. It had shown them that pain could bloom into beauty. That fear could become a flower. That silence could lead to peace. Moira continued her work. She cleaned the attic. She opened the window. She welcomed the moonlight. She watched the garden grow. And she watched the people grow too. The attic was no longer just a room. It was a place of truth. A place of healing. A place where flowers bloomed from the heart. Chapter 6. The Change. Moira no longer felt afraid. The fear that once lived quietly inside her had faded. She had faced her own flowers in the attic garden. She had seen her memories bloom into color and shape. She had touched her pain and understood it. She had helped others do the same. Each visitor who came to the attic brought something hidden. And each one left with something lighter. Moira had watched this happen again and again. She had learned that fear was not something to run from. It was something to meet with open eyes. The house on the hill had changed too. It was no longer seen as strange or forgotten. People in the village began to speak of it with respect. They didn't fear it anymore. They saw it as a place of truth. A place where silence became light. The red door still stood quietly, and the ivy still climbed the walls. But now, the house felt warm. It felt alive. It had become part of the village's heart. The village itself began to change slowly. It was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet and gentle. People spoke more kindly to each other. They listened with more care. They asked questions and waited for answers. They shared stories they had never told before. Pain that had been hidden for years began to rise and soften. People forgave. People understood. People grew. Moira stayed in the house. She didn't move away or seek a new life. She felt that her place was there, with the garden. She kept the attic clean. She opened the window each night. She let the moonlight in. She didn't try to control the garden. She didn't try to explain it. She simply cared for it. She gave it space to bloom. She gave people space to feel. The garden in the attic remained quiet. It didn't bloom during the day. It didn't need sunlight. It didn't need attention. It only needed honesty. It bloomed under the moon, when the world was still and soft. It bloomed when people were ready to face themselves. The flowers continued to grow from fear, from memory, from emotion. They were not always beautiful in shape, but they were beautiful in meaning. They showed what was real. They showed what was hidden. And they helped people heal. Moira became known not just as the woman who lived on the hill, but as someone who listened. She didn't speak much, but her presence was strong. People trusted her. They came to her not for answers, but for peace. She didn't give advice. She gave space. She gave silence. She gave moonlight. The change in the village was slow, but deep. Children grew up learning that feelings were not something to hide. Adults learned that pain could be shared. The attic garden had taught them that fear was not the enemy. Silence was. And once silence was broken, healing could begin. Moira knew the garden would always be there. Even if no one came for a while. Even if the moon was hidden by clouds. The garden would wait. It would bloom again when someone was ready. It didn't rush. It didn't demand. It simply offered a quiet truth. She sat in the attic one night, watching the flowers glow. She felt calm. She felt proud. She had not planned this. She had not searched for it. But she had accepted it. And that was enough. The garden had grown. The people had grown. And Moira had grown too. Moral: fear grows in silence. But when we face it, it becomes something we can understand. The garden in the attic showed that even the darkest feelings can bloom into something beautiful. Healing begins when we stop hiding. Sometimes, the moonlight is all we need to see clearly. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.